ESPN.com NFL Insider KC Joyner is back for his regular Friday conversation. It's a playoff edition, KC. It's snowy here. I know you're in Florida and they were calling for snow, but you're not getting any of this, are you?
No, unfortunately. We're going to get cold enough in the overnight to get snow. It got down to like 30 degrees last night, but there's no precipitation. So my kids, who are both teenagers, have still never seen snow in their life.
Well, what we have plenty. I'll send you a package, all right?
Okay, that'll work.
All right, we got a lot going on. It's wild card weekend, and we talked about this the other day on the show. If like some of these matchups were happening in like week 13 of the NFL season, they wouldn't be that sexy. Jacksonville's playing Buffalo, Kansas City's playing Tennessee, but we got playoffs on the line here, so these matchups become a little bit more intriguing. So let's start with that first game on Saturday afternoon. Tennessee without DeMarco Murray taking on Kansas City, which has been a Jekyll and Hyde team. They got off to a fast start, then they lost all those games. Then they finished strong with 4 straight wins. The Chiefs at home have lost 5 straight times in the playoffs here. I heard something the other day. It might have been you who told me the last drafted quarterback for the Chiefs to win a playoff game. I mean, you're going back like 50 years. I mean, Montana was the last quarterback to win a playoff game for them. So the Chiefs at home, it looks like a good spot for them. The Titans haven't been in the playoffs for a while, so we got a lot of storylines in this one.
Yeah, a lot. And, I mean, the Titans, it's bad that they don't have Murray, but they have Henry, who he's capable of being a bell cow back. If you look at his history, he can do it. And he hasn't had to carry the workload for too long, so you don't think he's going to be wore down, so that's good. I'm concerned for Tennessee's sake more about their run block because about the halfway point of the season, I did a measurement for ESPN's Insider section regarding offensive lines and who's the best and who was the worst, and Tennessee was in the top 5. Since then, they're still blocking fairly well, but they're much closer to the middle of the pack than they are in the top 5. So when you've got that kind of a drop-off for what is such a central part of their team, I think if Kansas City can start turning this into sort of a shootout game, I don't know that the Titans have the firepower to keep up.
By the way, it was Todd Blackledge, the last drafted quarterback. So not quite 50 years, but we're going back into about the 40-year range here. You look at a situation for Tennessee. Mariota, can Mariota at this stage lead his team to a playoff win on the road? Do you look at him as that type of quarterback?
He doesn't quite have the receiving core. I mean, Corey Davis is coming along nicely, but he still looks more like a rookie than an impact player that people were hoping he would be. Rashard Matthews is a solid receiver, but not much more. Walker's a really good tight end, but he's not. You're not talking about him like an Ertz or a Gronk or even a Travis Kelce. You're not talking about that level. So they just don't have that type of firepower around him, I don't think. And he also. His passing has not been nearly as good when you start looking at his vertical numbers compared to what he did in college. I thought that when he got to the NFL, teams are going to be able to lean more on his passing attack. As he actually turned Oregon, which had been a run-heavy team under Chip Kelly, into much more of a passing team. I thought they would do that in the NFL, and it still seems like they're trying to say power football and you just counterpunch and throw deep, and I don't think that's getting the most out of his talent. So as good as Tennessee's done this year to get to the playoffs, I still think they're underachieving.
What about them defensively? I mean, there's a lot of mixed reviews on what their defense is. Is it because their offense isn't that great? Do the Titans have the kind of defense that can help them, sneak in a wild card? I mean, I don't think anybody thinks this is a Super Bowl team, but can their defense get them a wild card round victory?
It can. I mean, they've got the front 7. I did those grades for the offensive line. I also did the flip side, did the front 7s at midseason, and they were a good but not great team, and they've been solid since then. Their production and good blocking, my good blocking rate metric that measures run blocking, run defense effectiveness, it's in upper half of the league, but they haven't reached top 10 levels. And the thing is if they were facing Kansas City a few weeks ago before the Kansas City made the play calling change, if they were facing them then, I'd say, boy, this defense can really dominate because Kansas City's blocking and taking a big step back. But Kansas City's run block has been a lot better since the play calling change happened. So I think that Tennessee's going to see the more powerful Chiefs offense probably not do as well.
KC Joyner is with us here looking at Wild Card Weekend. Let's stay with the Chiefs a little bit because what happened to this team, KC? Give us the tale of their season and why I don't know that you do, but if this team is a legitimate team that can make the Super Bowl? What is it about them? Because early on in the season, they beat the Patriots. They knocked off the Eagles. Not that at the time that Eagles win looked like it was going to be something special, but that was the 1 seed in the NFC. They ended up beating them. And then they had that terrible losing streak in the middle of the season. But now they've won 4 in a row. So who are they? Are they a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
It's going to sound odd that as good as Alex Smith was playing earlier the year, that I got the impression, look at the tape, that they got to the point where the Chiefs play callers, Andy Reid, let's just call it like it is, said, I don't know that I trust my offense to go through him. And I think when Reid made the play calling change, I think that they said, hey, we just need to funnel this offense as much as we can back through Smith and make teams fear what he can do, and then that'll open up our running game. So I think that's the big difference for them. The problem for Kansas City is good. Their blocking has been really good, but their front seven has been just atrocious most of the season. And I think they're the type of team that gets into shootout games. And if you get in the shootout games, you can look at their NFL history. Teams that tend to get in the shootout games, it's about a 50-50 proposition, no matter how great your offense is. Even like the 500-point offenses in NFL history, they win about 60% of their shootout games. It's not a good proposition. So I think this is a team that gets a win in the playoffs, but after that, if you're kind of going to shoot against the Pittsburgh or New England, you're in a really bad way for them, given how bad the defense is playing.
All right, Tennessee, Kansas City, the game on 97.3 ESPN. Give us who you like to win that first game.
I like Kansas City. I just see many more paths to victory, and I think that they're going to be able to get an offensive pace that Tennessee's just not going to be able to keep up with.
By the way, the caveat to this, tell the listeners the expert picks, where you finished in that.
Yeah, NFL Pick Watch is an independent site that tracks NFL picks, and this year I ranked tied for second, and I was first for the second season in a row among ESPN analysts, so having a pretty good season so far.
And how many people do they track?
It's over 100. It is over 100. They track everybody from every site, from ESPN, CBS, NFL Network, over 100 people.
So these picks are pretty good here. Again, over 100 people ranked. KC Joyner tied for second among his picks against, straight up against the NFL this season. All right, let's look at the second game on Saturday night, and it is the Rams at home against Atlanta. I find this one to be pretty interesting. You got the defending NFC champs against an upstart who hasn't made the playoffs in years. The Rams are a team that scores a lot. The last couple of years, the team that has the most points per game makes it to the Super Bowl. The Falcons were that team last year. So, can the Rams outscore their way to a win over the defending NFC champions?
Yeah, I think they can, because the problem I've been mentioning it all season long, the problem for the Falcons is the best person from last year's team, from that 2016 Super Bowl team, maybe the most important person on their team, is now in San Francisco calling plays for the 49ers, because Kyle Shanahan has the most creative play calling. I did some deep dive breakdowns of this past offseason, took a look at different things for coaches and things, play callers, and found that the play calling things that he used, the methodologies he used, are just there. Nobody else does them, and it messes up defenses in 100 ways. So Sarkisian's nowhere near as good. He's much more of a run-heavy play caller, and that could be a problem for Atlanta, because Freeman's going into this game with a knee injury, so they may only have Coleman. Although they've got Ward's a good number 3, so I think it'll be somewhat a little bit of a challenged offense there. And the Rams are just the other play caller who might be as good as Shanahan would have to be Sean McVay. Mm-hmm. So I really like what they did offensively.
When you look at the Rams, the passing game with Jared Goff, what stands out about their passing game? Because when you look at Atlanta, Julio Jones. When you look at a lot of these teams, they have that receiver that stands out. Jared Goff's had a pretty good year. What is it about the passing game that has allowed Goff to excel?
I love that they find great roles for every one of their players. They've got Robert Woods, and Robert Woods, when he was at USC, was a workhorse receiver, and Buffalo never could figure out what to do with him. He gets out to the Rams, and McVay knows exactly what to do with him. He's a very good workhorse receiver. You got Cooper Kupp, who's a Julian Edelman type, is a dink and dunk receiver who has surprisingly good vertical skills. And you start going, okay, well, they've got even Josh Reynolds. They found roles from Tavon Austin, this gadget player. They got him in the backfield late in some of their blowout games. They've got him running back, and they found roles for him. And Watkins. Okay, they only throw Watkins 4 passes a game. Great. He had score touchdowns in 5 out of 6 weeks, I believe it was. So he may only catch 3 passes, but one of them was a 40-yard post drop for a touchdown. He's just found roles for all of these players that maximizes their skill set. It just shows how creative the play caller really is.
Yeah, that's an interesting, wide receiving core there. The two Bills guys, Jared Goff, who people after 7 games last year, thought that maybe he couldn't play. He ends up with 28 touchdowns, 3,800 yards. But the guy who really makes them go is Gurley, right?
He is, and that's the biggest turnaround for that team. They weren't the worst offensive line in 2016. That would have to go to the Seahawks. I mean, they were that bad. But the Rams were among probably the bottom 5 teams in the league in the offensive line. They were number 1 in that midseason review that I did for ESPN's Insider section. I'm going to be revisiting it this coming week, by the way. I don't think the Rams are probably going to be number 1 for the season-ending ones, but they're going to be top 5 easily. So you could take an offensive line and take it from as bad as they were last year to as great as they are this year. That's partially play calling, but it's also just coaching, their offensive line coaching too. So I got to give props to them for that.
Okay, if Atlanta makes the run, what is it about Atlanta?
If Atlanta makes the run, it's that they get back to going to their vertical game and say, okay, we're gonna go to Julio Jones. We're gonna do things in the vertical passing game that we did last year in the playoffs. Because if they're trying to be just a run-heavy team, they don't have they're not that powerful on the ground game, and they don't have the kind of defense to get hold up with that. So they've got to open up and try and win those shootout games I was talking about. And hope they get buck the odds of win 3 straight.
Okay, KC Joyner, Atlanta, L.A. Who do you like?
I got the Rams it wouldn't surprise me to see them win that game by 10 points.
Okay, and don't forget the game here on 97.3 ESPN. That's the second game on Saturday. Let's move to Sunday. Doug Marrone was in Buffalo. He had them moving in the right direction, and he said, you know what? I got a horrible team moving in a good direction. I'm going to be in high demand. He wasn't. He sat out a couple of years as a coordinator. He gets a job in Jacksonville. He now gets to prove to Buffalo that they should have anteed up the cash to keep him there. But he's up against Sean McDermott's Bills, who are going to have a less than 100% LaShawn McCoy. The Jacksonville defense, this Bills team that I don't know that has a really redeeming quality. So is this got a blowout written on it?
If McCoy was fully healthy, I'd say, boy, that the Bills have a chance to pull off an upset in this game because the Jaguars' defense has not been anywhere near as good the past few games. They were terrible against the run the first probably quarter of the season, and then they got Darius, and they turned things around and became a much better run defense, but they've taken a step back of late. So if he was healthy, I'd say, yeah, they do. But it's not like they've got quality backups behind him. They're not going to, it's him and basically nobody else. Tolbert, they don't have anybody else to backfield they can lean on. So with that being the case, I don't think Tyrod Taylor can help them win. In fact, I'll give you a stat up for Taylor and how it could really be a bad game for him. The last 2 games, the Bills allowed 10 sacks, and the run of they allowed 4 more sacks in 6 games this year. Only 2 teams allowed 4 more sacks in more games. So that's not a place you want to be if you're having a pass against the Jaguars.
No, and Jacksonville's a team that can sack you 10 times in a game. If the Jacksonville defense, are they a team with that defense that could pull off a couple upsets?
I think they could, but that defense has to play where it's capable. I still think that they're a defense that is really good, but you saw the 49ers, and the 49ers, mind you, don't have the greatest offensive personnel, but so they get Garoppolo back there, and you get, they've got good personnel, not great personnel, but look what they did a couple weeks ago. I think the teams are capable of doing that against the Jaguars. In fact, if I'm the Jaguars, I'm not liking if I win this game going to Pittsburgh and say, okay, I got to try and beat them in Pittsburgh. They did it before,
yep.
But that was when Roethlisberger wasn't playing anywhere near as well. And if Antonio's back and the way the Steelers offense is playing, if I'm the Jaguars defense, they go, I think I fooled you once. I don't know if they'll do it twice.
And Roethlisberger has already come out and said he'd like the rematch with Jacksonville. So that's probably not good news for them. What about Jacksonville's offense? Bortles played well for a stretch there, but he's kind of regressed a little bit. He had a really good year 2 years ago. He was not as good last year, has been up and down this year. They're a team that, the weapons don't jump off the page. They do have Fournette. They're kind of like, they seem like the Rams a little bit, but the quarterback's not quite there.
No, he's not. And I think they got to a point where they said in the beginning of the year, because before the season, Marrone said they was asked, how often do you want to pass the ball? He said, if I could, I'd run on every single play, which is really not saying much about your quarterback if you say, I don't ever want him to throw the football. But he changed his mind, obviously. He got about midseason. I think he realized I've got such a powerful rushing attack and I've got such a powerful defense. I can let Bortles take some more chances. But you let Bortles start taking some chances, and he's going to make some of the crazy passes he's been making of late. That's the risky part for them. And mind you, Buffalo's got a ball hawker defense. If I had to say, okay, how do the Bills win this game? Is the Jaguars say, we need to get our offense kick-started, so we're going to go ahead and let Bortles throw the ball, and they pick up a couple passes, maybe get a pick six or two if they're lucky, and suddenly it changes. I don't think it's going to happen that way, but if I were to pick a scenario, that would be it. So, yeah, for the Jaguars, I just don't think that they can get the playoffs and trust Bortles, and maybe they can get away with that in this game, but if you're playing Pittsburgh and New England back-to-back after that, you're not going to Bortles to beat Roethlisberger or Brady.
Yeah, because the underrated thing about Jacksonville, we talk about the defense. They scored over 415 points this year on offense. I mean, they had a couple of games where they just had some offensive explosions. So they're really Jekyll and Hyde on the offensive side of the ball, and a lot of that is tied to Blake Bortles.
Yeah, it is. In their rushing attack, though, if you look at I do the good blocking rate metrics for them, and they've done very well a lot of the time in good blocking rate, but there are times when their offensive line does not do well in good blocking rate. They have really bad games. So, again, you want to be a really consistent team headed into the playoffs, and if you don't think if their offensive line say has a bad game against Buffalo, I don't think he's less than 80%. I don't think there's any chance, but if their defense starts to play as well as it's capable and they can dominate the offensive line matchup, maybe it turns into a low-scoring game, and if that's the case, you just need Tyrod Taylor to make one play.
Sunday afternoon, it's Buffalo-Jacksonville on 97.3 ESPN. KC, who do you like?
Yeah, 9 out of 10 times I'm picking the Jaguars in this one easily, because 9 out of 10 I think Buffalo's got maybe a 10% chance to pull the upset, but since I tend to go chalk on my picks, I definitely go with Jacksonville on this one.
Okay, let's turn our attention then to the game that's Sunday at 4:40 right here on 97.3 ESPN, and it is a division matchup between Carolina and the Saints. The Saints have kind of, owned this matchup this year. Carolina's got Cam Newton against Drew Brees. So you got two quarterbacks who have made the Super Bowl, one Super Bowl champion quarterback. Let's start with the Saints here, because we did this the other day. Everyone seems to like the Saints the best of the three South teams. They did win the division, but Atlanta won 3 of 4. Carolina's won 3 of 4. The Saints have only won 2 of the last 4. The other two teams come in a little bit better right now, playing-wise, than the Saints do. But what is it about the Saints offensively for the playoffs that you might lean that way?
I'll give you a metric on this. For defenses, when the defense loads the tackle box, that's when they bring one more defender than the offense has blockers. So when the defense is saying, we're going to bring an extra person here, make sure you don't run the football. Drew Brees has the highest completion percentage against the loaded tackle box of any quarterback in the league, 72.1%. So he leads that. The bad thing for defenses also, though, the Saints also have the highest rushing yards for the loaded box. Carolina was 23rd in the completion percentage allowed when they loaded the defensive box. If I'm Carolina, I said, I'm not even going to bother trying to load the defensive box. I'm going to try and play these guys straight up, because loading the box is just a bad element for them.
They run the ball. Kamara, Ingram. I mean, I remember Ingram in the game against the Eagles in 2013. They ran the ball against the Eagles 36 times in that game. They only threw it 30 times in that game. So we know Sean Payton's not afraid to lean on the run game come playoff time. Is that the recipe for a Saints victory? Or, KC Joyner, do you lean on Drew Brees?
No, I definitely lean on the rushing attack and let Drew Brees be the counterpuncher. That's where they are right now. They've got the defense. Before, it used to be you had to have Brees throw the ball all the time, because you couldn't trust the defense to win the game. So you knew you were going to get the shootout, so let's have Brees throw it. But, no, I'm definitely leaning on the ground attack, although if I'm Carolina, I'm definitely afraid of Michael Thomas, because he's a top 5 receiver in the league, and I look at the Carolina secondary and go, I don't think there's anybody in the secondary who could keep up with him. Bradbury is a solid corner, but there's very few cornerbacks in the league who can match up to Michael Thomas. So if I'm New Orleans, I'm definitely going to try and hit that matchup a couple of times just to put the fear of that into the defense.
What's Olsen add to this Carolina team that maybe he wasn't 100% or maybe he didn't play in a couple of the matchups, but he didn't. I don't know that he was at full strength for much when he returned. So what does Olsen add for Carolina?
If he's at full strength or close to it, if he's where he can be, what he does, he's very odd for a tight end. That most tight ends don't service the vertical threat in their offense. They're not the guy who you go to for longer passes. They'll be counterpunchers in the vertical game, but they're not the primary threat. Olsen was arguably the primary vertical threat even when they had Kelvin Benjamin, who's no longer there. But he was the vertical threat in the offense even at that point. So that's what he does for them, is gives them a vertical attack, because they have nobody else in their offense. I mean, well, Funches sort of. Funches is still a top vertical threat. But if Olsen's healthy, he's the primary vertical threat, which is a concern for the Saints because Vaccaro, one of their starting safeties, has just went out for the season a couple weeks ago. So they're playing a backup safety, and that might be a matchup that Carolina can exploit.
Defensively, the Saints are much better than they've been in past years. It's one of the reasons why people like them a lot. Is their defense what they appear to be? When we went over their schedule, the other day on the show during that 8-game win streak. After you read off some of the teams they beat in that 8-game win streak, it wasn't quite as impressive as it might have sounded. They beat a lot of non-playoff teams in that 8-game win streak, and then again they didn't finish the season all that strong. They lost. They were just 2-2 down the stretch. So, is their defense as good as advertised?
I think Lattimore's very good. Crawley's good. They've got. And the safety, again, I'm concerned about their safeties because although Von Bell's a good replacement, so I think they'll be okay at safety. It is a step back for them. But they finally have a secondary that says we don't have to get in the shootouts with teams, or we can prevent shootouts. We can keep teams from making us have to score 30 points on offense to win. And that wasn't what they were like for many years before. And so to be able to say we don't have to do that is a huge plus. So, yeah, their defense now is that their defense doesn't need to be protected by their offense anymore. The offense still plays the run-heavy game that's going to protect them, but they don't have to protect it anymore. That's a huge plus.
Because when you look at certain teams, you say, man, on their defense, you got a game plan for this guy. Who's that guy on that Saints defense?
Lattimore. He'd be the guy you don't want to throw to. He'd be the guy you can say, I've got to find ways to not put the ball in the air against him because he's a shutdown cornerback in coverage. And he's not a great ball hawk, but he's a good enough ball hawk. You put enough passes up his way, he's going to pick one off. So he's the guy to worry about.
Carolina, this is a team that went 15-1 a couple of years ago, went to the Super Bowl. Last year had their struggles, but they're back 11-5. It seems that a lot of people are not talking about them. In the NFC field, which is really 6 deep. All 6 teams have a legitimate shot here. It seems that Carolina is kind of the maybe they're the 5th or 6th shot, but. Do you like Carolina defensively? Because that's really where they got to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Their defense was great.
Their defense at that midway point of the season, when I did those analyses for ESPN's Insider section, their front 7, actually, to be more specific, their front 7 graded as the best in the league. So that's how powerful their front 7 can be. They've not played as well in the front 7 of late, so I think they're still going to probably, when they do next week's grading, I have a feeling they're probably going to be top 10. I don't think they'll make top 5, so they have taken a step back, but they are capable of having that type of a defense. But I think that's the thing, too, is that a couple of years ago they had that powerhouse defense, and the offense was just overwhelming, and this year the offense is good, and they've got more diversity in their backfield, but they don't have the vertical passing game's not nearly what it was. And I think that Cam is no longer the central part of that offense. I think he's more of again, I keep using the word counterpuncher, but I think that's what he is. So for Carolina's perspective, I think they're going to have to rely on their front 7 and their offensive line to win the game.
Okay, KC Joyner, that's the last game on Sunday. It's Carolina and the Saints. Who do you like?
I'm taking the Saints in that one. I just think that they have more path to victory. I think it's probably a 60-40 edge for them. I don't think it's an overwhelming advantage for them. But again, when you're playing at home and you've got that many more ways to win, I think it's a bigger plus.
Okay, you got a chalk weekend from KC Joyner. If you're an Eagles fan this weekend, Atlanta, Carolina, and the Saints, who are you hoping gets through to Philadelphia?
I'm probably wanting Atlanta to win that matchup because I just don't think – I think their play calling is so suspect, and I think they're the sort of team that will – if you give them the opportunities, if you set up a game plan for them to play a game that would end, say, 2017, they would take you up on it. That's what the Eagles need. The Eagles do not need a team that's going to make them have to make that offense put up 24 or more points. So I want Atlanta to win if I'm an Eagles fan.
Okay, you picked all the favorites. If there is an upset, who is it?
If there's an upset, it would probably be Carolina would be the upset. If McCoy ended up being fully healthy, I would pick that game as the upset, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So if I had to pick an upset, I would have to pick Carolina and say that they can play their offensive line and their defensive front 7 could go toe to toe and win that contest that way because they're that good in that area. But that'd be the only upset I'd pick.
Okay, ESPN.com NFL insider KC Joyner, and he joins us each and every Monday and Friday on the Sports Bash. Friday to preview the matchups, Monday to break them all down. And when we're back on Monday's show, Casey will be here to go over Wild Card Weekend, and we'll start to take a look at that Eagles opponent on Monday's show, I'm sure. right here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. I don't know if you woke up early for Wrestle Kingdom, but if you did, get some rest, my man. That's a early wake-up call. If not, enjoy the weekend with the family. I
will be checking out Wrestle Kingdom very soon. I didn't get a chance to see it live. It looks like an awesome card, and I definitely enjoy it. In fact, there's somebody in the NFL who I'll leave unnamed, but I had an NFL person tell me, you need to check out this New Japan Wrestling. So I'm definitely doing that to take him up on that offer.
All right, my man. KC Joyner, have a great weekend. We'll do it again on Monday.
Thank you, man.